Welcome to the Finance and Tech podcast. I'm your host and Chief Finance Techie, Simon Ritchie. And this is a show where we dive into all things technology for finance teams. I interview other finance techies, finance leaders, and industry legends who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build and grow your career in finance. In this podcast, I speak to Bhavik Vashi. We go way back. We actually used to work together, and I thought he'd be a great guest to bring on. Bhavik is currently the managing director for Carta in APAC, in Asia Pacific. And the focus for this week is to hear from a next-gen sales leader about what makes a difference with working with your finance team and how they can support on the mission. Carta is an impressive B2B software company. They're commonly known as a cap table or equity management, is another way to describe it, company. And Bhavik discusses his journey from his start actually at KPMG in accounting, and now he's moved right the way over in and is the sales leader and general manager, responsible for everyone over in APAC for Carta, which is a really impressive journey. He shares his insights on what's made him successful so far. I really dived into what a week in the life looks like, such as things like his leadership cadence, some of the major meetings, the key metrics that he's watching to stay on top of the business. And Bhavik also emphasized the importance of having a really strong finance business partner who understands the context of the business. And that really empowers him to make the right decisions, make really well-informed decisions. We dive into essential tech for his role, but also, for making sure his teams are running really successfully, enough leads are coming through, etc. And Bhavik's really big on this idea he talks about called the abstraction layer. And some people might call it the spreadsheet. It's the place where you bring data from all sorts of places together and you combine it, and it gives you that information that you use to connect both the operational data and financial data and really make decisions. And so we dived into that topic. Bhavik, this is a really great episode. Bhavik is, I consider, a rising star in the space. Carta is an impressive company, and this episode does not disappoint. Enjoy. All right, Bhavik, thanks so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Hey, Simon, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's jump in. Maybe you could just give the listeners a quick intro and background on your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So I currently am serving as a managing director for Carta across Asia Pacific as well as the Middle East. And I've been doing this for about a year now. Actually, I think yesterday was my 1 year anniversary. So yeah, for
Nice.
1 year now. Prior to this, as you know, I spent almost a decade, I think it was like 9 years plus at Anaplan, which across a variety of different functions, predominantly, I would say, consulting, professional services, then kind of customer success, and then really spent the last 3+ years doing sales and go-to-market leadership. And then prior to that, I started my career at KPMG doing accounting. So that's kind of where I got my start. And my undergraduate degree is in business from Berkeley. So yeah, that's my path.
Yeah, awesome, nice. So you're in Singapore you're in Singapore right now with
Yes.
Carta. Do you want to just explain what Carta does and what your focus is?
Yeah, sure. So Carta is a software company, a B2B software company. And what we're really kind of aspiring to do is build a platform to enable various different components of the private markets. So what I think we're most popularly known as is a cap table or an equity management company. That was really our first product where we wanted to effectively digitize paper stock certificates and bring that into the cloud. But what it really did is allow us to actually become the system of record for equity ownership. and really understand who owns what in the private markets, which is, as you know, a lot more opaque and illiquid compared to public markets. So that's really where we started, and we started to kind of expand our product portfolio to solve different problems for different stakeholders in the private market. So venture capitalists, limited partners, LPs who invest into those venture capital firms, who then invest into founders and amazing startups, who then invest into amazing employees. And so today we have a set of software products across cap table and equity management for startups, venture and kind of private fund administration. So really running kind of the back office for investment funds, so accounting, compliance, reporting, things of that nature. And then we've also got a secondary marketplace that we run called Carta X, which is effectively allows you to buy and sell private stock and other private assets the way we all are able to do with public assets, which is really kind of the big vision of the company is hopefully one day private markets will be just as easy and transparent as public markets are.
Awesome. Nice. So like, a fun question to begin with. What makes you feel inspired or motivated?
Good question. I think probably at the most kind of macro level, what makes me feel inspired or motivated is just knowing that I am having an impact on the world, but that's kind of broad. So I usually say the impact on the people around me. And then you can define the community, whether it's my physical community in my neighborhood, or if it's the community that I'm creating, in the workplace. Maybe it's the community within the team of the company I work for. So yeah, really just having an impact, making a difference, and kind of moving things, I think, one step forward in terms of, I guess, productivity and happiness in general. That's probably like the really abstract answer of that. It probably kind of translates to a lot of like day-to-day things that make me very happy as well.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what's something that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Um, is this like professional or personal? Because I could go either way on this.
Either,
Okay, I'll share a personal one.
yeah.
I think people are really surprised to find out that I am like a passionate Bollywood film and music fan. I think
All
people
right.
assume, as somebody who was born and raised in the U.S.,
Yes.
I just think that surprises people when they meet me. They don't expect it, but I actually don't listen to a ton of English music. I listen to quite a lot of Hindi language music, mostly from Bollywood, which is our film industry.
Yeah.
And same with movies. Like people will list off movies they've seen recently, and I've usually not seen any of them. But then if I'm in an Indian community usually, and they say, "Oh, did you see the most recent Bollywood film that came out?" Yeah, I'm all over it. So yeah, I think that's pretty surprising to most people.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
very cool. See, I didn't even know that, and we've known each other for years. So
There you go. Yeah.
That's great. So, so our topic for today is really about sales. So I'm really interested in the transition that you made from accounting, starting at KPMG, and
Yeah.
then you moved over into customer success and then into sales. And I'd love to talk about how finance people can support customer success or salespeople better.
Sure.
So I suppose my first question is, how did you make that transition from finance, accounting into
Hmm.
sales? Like, how did that come about? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't overnight, right?
yeah,
Like you said, it was like a gradual series of steps, I think. Some unintentional, some,
yeah,
quite a bit more intentional. I think that it's really I consider two big steps if we were talking about. One was leaving the world of Big Four accounting, which is a
sure,
completely different ball game, and
yeah,
deciding to join a small tech company,
yeah,
Anaplan, right? Like
exactly,
that, I
yeah,
think was the big change
yeah,
that I made, and that one was completely unintentional in the sense, like it's not like I had a mission to get into tech or anything like that. It was actually more I had a mission to get out of public accounting. And
Right.
I had realized that, it wasn't for me. I know there's probably accountants that will listen to this, and that's not saying accounting is bad, but it's just for me, I realized very quickly it wasn't something that I enjoyed. I didn't get as motivated about it as I felt like I should. And so
Yeah.
I just really wanted to make a change. And specifically, there was a busy season coming up that I wanted to avoid. And so there's a high level of urgency for me to make a move
It
because I
was
did not want to
avoidance.
do that. Yeah, totally. So that was the first big one. And
Okay.
the most logical entry point for me to get into tech happened to be this tech company that was doing something in the financial planning and analysis space.
Mm,
And what made me, I guess, relevant was that I understood a cash flow statement and a balance sheet and
yeah.
income
Yeah.
statement. So I had my kind of core accounting skills that were relevant, and kind of just adapting those to more of a forward-looking forecasting and planning context. And then, my first role was to build software that enabled, people to plan better.
Yeah.
And I thought that was super interesting relative to accounting, which is all kind of rear view mirror. This was
Yeah.
all kind of looking forward and kind of thinking about what that would look like. So that was the first big change.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of went from there. And then, as you said, I guess the second big one was moving from the consulting and more broadly, let's say, customer success side to the sales side,
Yeah.
and just broader kind of go-to-market side. That one was much more intentional. I think the
Okay.
more I did consulting, the more I did customer success, I started to understand the different revenue streams for us as a business. And I realized that understanding the product, understanding your customers intimately would lend to hopefully making me a much more effective salesperson and sales leader,
Mm,
in a more consultative way, perhaps.
yeah.
And I'd always gotten, a kick out of, the pursuit, and the challenge of kind of bringing someone from point A to B, and something that I believed in. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of an intentional move, and I was able to kind of navigate the way internally to get into that opportunity.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that's it's a big step up. So you're now managing director, which I think of as, you're driving sales, but it's also all aspects of go to market in the region.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk us through, a week in the life of a managing director? What are you responsible for? What are you thinking about? What
Yeah.
does the team look like?
Yeah. It's very cliche, but I honestly think, week looks the same, especially at Carta. I think there are other companies where the managing director really only um, owns, sales, so to
Yeah.
speak. I think even at Anaplan it was like this. If you were MD of a region, your only direct reports were salespeople, and you
Okay.
had a lot of, influence dotted line into functions like customer success and pre-sales and marketing and other things. And you absolutely were seen as the overall leader that needed to bring everything together, but you had a very direct responsibility and accountability for sales.
Yeah.
At Carta, the managing director role is different. You have a direct reporting org, which is across all departments in your region, from
Okay.
sales to delivery to marketing to partnerships to operations and even employee experience. So it is truly, I think the best analogy I could use is it's a kind of a mini CEO or COO type role where you've got a piece of the business,
Yeah.
that you need to take care of. And so as a result, a week
Yeah.
in the life is can be very different. I'll give you
Mm,
this week, for example, we are in the process of moving to a new office, and so I'm speaking to contractors about kind of how that is going, right,
yeah.
and kind of keeping a oversight on that. We're in the process of switching, to a benefits plan for the employees, and so kind of working through what that's going to look like. And of course, there's like the more traditional activities of the sales forecast and driving sales execution, the marketing plan, and how are we executing marketing activities to generate demand? How is our outbound prospecting efforts going? How is delivery handling the intake of all the logos we win? What are we kind of doing to influence or drive the product roadmap to support our region. So yeah, really just a little bit of everything, which is obviously what I personally love about the job.
Yeah.
It really keeps me on my toes, and back to my original answer, it really makes me feel like I'm able to have an impact in many different ways. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, really broad influence. Um, yeah, pretty big responsibility, which is fantastic. What would you say are some of the key ceremonies that help you to to keep on top of what's going on and that are crucial to success?
Yeah. Um, it's an interesting one, ceremonies. So
I
I'd
suppose
love
like
to kind of clarify. Yeah.
within a weekly or monthly cadence, maybe that's a term I picked up somewhere, that within a weekly or monthly cadence, what are the key meetings
Yeah.
that meetings is probably a good word for swap ceremonies for meetings. What are the key meetings that help you keep on top of things like the sales forecast, the marketing plan, delivery status, etc.?
Yeah.
How do you run the business? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a constantly. I think it's something that's I try to evolve depending on the stage of growth that we're at, because
Yeah.
I'm the last person who wants to be stuck in like recurring meetings, and have half your
Yeah.
calendar blocked every week where
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I come into it with only 20 available hours because there's all these blocks, right? So I really try to avoid it. Um,
Uh-huh.
there are two sacred, really sacred meetings for me that up until now in my career have always been a good use of time.
Mhm.
Basically, I call it, the leadership meeting, which
Yeah.
is, you know, mm, kind of what it sounds like. It is the leaders of all the functions coming together, in our case, physically around a table, and just we kind of crowdsource the agenda every week. So, pre-meeting on Slack, it's like, hey, what do we want to talk about? I'll have my own bullets that I'll put into the list, but other people can have things they want to talk about, like that they
Yeah.
need to share, or things that they would like to talk about, like they're requesting information as well, like, hey, I want an update on this, that, or the other. So that leadership meeting, which is much more conversational, usually, minimal PowerPoints unless someone needs it to kind of
Yeah.
explain or update on their project. It's their choice, but it's very conversational. It's discussion oriented, a lot of active conversation, and it's usually very strategic in terms of kind of where are we going, where are we moving, and we'll manage across these three horizons of the long term, so like the 3 years, the
Yeah.
kind of what I call strategic, the operational, which is kind of the year that we're operating in within the fiscal year, and then the execution, which could be just the month or the quarter that we're operating in. So that's one, which is really important to me. And the second is either called what I call the forecast meeting, or what I've recently rebranded as kind of the metrics meeting, because there are certain metrics that aren't necessarily forecasting, but they
Yeah.
are
Right.
key
Yeah.
numerical, quantitative business metrics that I think we should look at on a weekly basis. And that one is, pretty much the opposite of what I described. It is fully numbers oriented. There's a there's not PowerPoint, but we're usually living in some kind of system, whether it's a Salesforce or an Anaplan or a Blocks or a Google Sheet or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
there's somewhere where we're bringing a lot of data together, and we're looking at numbers,
Yeah.
and then we're asking questions about those numbers. We're discussing those numbers, and we're trying to understand what that tells us about our business.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. So that happens weekly.
Yeah.
And who's in that meeting, the metrics meeting?
Yeah, so definitely evolves over time. So when I started at Carta, it was every single rep. It was everybody. Like it was basically an all hands meeting, but
Yeah.
focused on metrics rather than focused on here's, so let's celebrate the top performer from last
Yeah.
week, or let's,
Yeah.
give a strategic update. It was like numbers.
Yeah.
As we've grown, and we have now over 40 people, it's really more the people who own those individual metrics. So
Yeah.
obviously marketing owns the kind of the inbound kind of number for us. Partnerships owns a partner originated number for us. SDRs own pipe gen and meetings booked numbers. Salespeople own the quotas. CS owns NDR, net dollar retention. So
Yeah.
basically anybody who owns a number
Be in that
will
meeting.
be in the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Um, Fantastic. So then I was thinking we could jump into what are some of those key metrics, or maybe actually before that, maybe we could just
Hmm.
talk about like what keeps you up at night. So if you're thinking about in a work context, um, what keeps you up at night? What worrying, am I going to be successful with the mandate, the responsibilities that you've been given?
Yeah, I think uh, I think the outcome that keeps me up at night is
Hmm.
growth.
Yeah,
And I've always chosen to work in pretty growth oriented, almost,
yeah,
borderline hyper growth environments. It's what I'm
yeah,
attracted to. So
yeah,
there's always a relatively ambitious or aggressive growth target,
yeah,
sometimes triple digit growth, which is being targeted. And so that as an outcome keeps me up because there's so many ways to get there. Like if the goal is to grow 100% year over year, there are just like an infinite ways that you
yeah,
might achieve that. So that's the outcome. But then, and that's always there. I literally can never get rid of it.
yeah,
I think there are different inputs to that
yeah,
outcome that, depending on the month or the week, are keeping me up. Sometimes it's maybe it's demand generation related, like, yeah, great, we did our numbers this month, but are we generating enough demand to sustainably do that number
yeah,
over the next 3 months, especially when our sales capacity will increase and therefore our overall expectations in terms of quotas and outputs will increase. Sometimes it's around people, especially, if it's like, hey, are we hiring and recruiting efficiently and effectively enough and in a way that doesn't, obviously disrupt some of the momentum and the culture that we've been building and that's got us here, or
yeah,
sometimes it's even if we're not hiring and recruiting, but are the people who are in the four walls of the company, are they feeling motivated, challenged, inspired, engaged to
mm,
continue to kind of give it their best every day? And if not, what do we need to do about that, right? So
mm,
these are some examples of some of the inputs I would say
yeah,
that keep me up.
yeah,
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 but they all kind of tie back to kind of how are we going to achieve that growth.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then now we can get into some of the key metrics that you look at, and you've already talked a bit about them. But what are
Mhm.
the really in your dashboard and your weekly metrics meeting? What are the key metrics that you're diving into that are really
Yeah.
important to you? Yeah,
The number one metric, as you would imagine, is sales.
yeah,
Just kind of, you, I always tell people, the metrics meeting is nothing more than working our way down the P&L, if you think about it that way.
yeah,
So it's like in the P&L, you're going to have the top line revenue,
yeah,
right? And sales is kind of a precursor to revenue, right? You just
yeah,
apply revenue recognition waterfalls to your sales and you'll have a sense of revenue. So
mhm,
it's really around sales. How are we doing against our sales target? And we'll drill down on that all the way to, specific regions, specific products, specific segments, down to specific reps, and
yeah,
also see how that rolls up. And like being able to go up and down in terms of zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in
yeah,
is really critical.
yeah,
You can't just get the top line number and say, okay, we're 400 on a 500 target. It almost tells you nothing.
yeah,
You really have to understand the pockets of, hey, this
mm,
piece is doing really well, this piece is struggling, this person is struggling, whatever it may be.
yeah,
So sales is where we start, and then like, I literally walk my way through. So if you think about what's after revenue, it's cost of revenue, right?
yeah,
So the things that impact your gross margin,
yeah,
and for us, like on our fund administration business, for example, it's a pretty heavy there's a services component to it.
yeah,
So I have to think about the delivery team that is helping to deliver a specific service, and what are the kind of the pieces around that. Obviously product can help improve your margin profile, so with thinking about those things,
yeah,
but really on the services business you have to think about the gross margin, and then kind of some of the things that get you to your bottom line as well in terms of the spend factor. So your marketing spend is a big one. Obviously, commissions and salaries are going to be a big one.
yeah,
T&E as an example. Like you're going to work through all those lines, and so
yeah,
I'm in general we're looking at the expense side as well. But there's a lot of time spent on sales, and we
Yeah.
deconstruct sales as well. So we think about, well, here's the sales I have, but here's the pipeline we're generating, which will turn into future sales. So we go backwards that way. We also look at the others of all the stuff we've already sold. How are those folks doing in terms of retention, right, and net dollar retention, and are we creating a flywheel? So we spend a lot of time on sales, and then we kind of slightly more quickly work our way through the rest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. So maybe we can jump into sales forecasting, target setting, etc. A
Yeah.
little bit. So when you're looking at sales, yeah, what are you looking at? So you said you're looking at some of that, the business you've already closed. So that's closed and won,
hmm
and then you're also looking at a forecast. But forecasting is tricky, and you're probably taking inputs from different places. So how does that run? Yeah, how do you run that?
Yeah. Um, we try to look at multiple different, so actuals are actuals,
Yeah,
for better or for worse. It's very simple. You have some system of record, you bring it in, you add up numbers
yeah,
by as many different properties as you can to get a sense of what you've actually done. And then the forecast, we usually look at it multiple ways, and this has kind of been consistent. So one, which I love to do and I still believe in, is a bottoms up, what I call a bottoms up, which is
yeah,
really a highly collaborative process. I mean,
yeah,
it's really basically every rep telling us what they think they're going to do
mm,
from a sales perspective. And sometimes not just telling us, not just a rep is giving us a number, they're giving it to us by the deal, like this deal on this date,
yeah,
80% confident at
okay,
this value, right? And then you have all these variables, even in that one line, that could change. What if the date moves? What if the
yeah,
number moves? What
yeah,
if the probability changes? Like, so
yeah,
that, we really kind of get it all the way from bottom and then roll that up to the bottoms
yeah,
up forecast, what I call.
yeah.
No crazy math there, just a lot of collaboration required to
Yeah,
kind of get that done
has
in
to go
a
around all the reps and get them to input and know when
exact
they completed it, all that
in
sort of
an
thing.
efficient way too, right? You need to do it efficiently. It shouldn't be what people are spending a majority of their time with, so it needs to be very streamlined. But you
Yes.
need to also be able to jump into that level of detail because
Yeah.
sometimes one or two deals will be the difference. And so if you're not seeing that detail, it's tough.
Yeah.
Um, then
Because that's
and then
like
there's also an
that's like a
algorithmic.
management tool, isn't it? Like you're asking your team to to download their information so that in a way that you can see it and then you can add it up and look at it across the region.
Yeah,
Um, so it's really powerful, but it's also probably um, can distract reps from doing selling.
yeah,
So it has
precisely.
to be done carefully. Are you getting them to input that every week, or do you kind of do it every other week, or what does that look like normally, or is it just in the run up to a key deadline,
Yeah.
month end or quarter end?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously, I think the specifics of your go-to-market motion matter a
Sure.
lot. We
Yeah.
have two very distinct businesses. We have our cap table business where things can close in like one or two calls, right?
Okay.
You find a founder, the founder's like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm raising money, I need a
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
One call, one demo, credit card here, we've sold
Yeah.
a deal. And
Yeah.
so, and then we've got this other business, which is much more maybe enterprise or mid-market in nature, where we're selling to a venture capital fund manager. We've
Yeah.
gone through a multi-month sales process of kind of understand, explaining our service, explaining the software,
Yeah.
going through a competitive evaluation, so on and so forth. So these things matter in terms of how you do it. I think the
Yeah.
former can be a little bit more mathematical,
Yeah.
just because it's a volume type business versus the latter. The bottoms up is really, really important because it's kind of binary when you get down to the deal levels of what's in and out. But in short, we do the forecast every week for all business lines. I think the way we do it, the level of detail we do it to is slightly different, but we do it every week. The reps, we ask them to keep, the CRM, customer relationship management. We ask them to keep CRM up to date. We use that as a source of truth.
Yeah.
And what we do in our what I call the abstraction layer, where we pull CRM data into, again, an Excel, a Blocks, an Anaplan, or whatever. We use that really for every level above the reps. So the first line sales manager, in case there's a second line, obviously myself,
Yeah.
where we're applying judgment, we're applying adjustments, where
Yeah.
we're able to kind of basically what you're trying to do is come up with a range of probabilities and kind
Yes.
of have a sense of your high, your low. And
Yeah.
then you start to kind of really predict outcomes and obviously what you can do to change where you land in that spectrum of potential outcomes. That's the meaningful discussion, obviously, not just
Yeah.
doing forecasting for the hell of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do that on a weekly basis, and
Okay.
hold the leadership team accountable for that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I suppose then what are you reporting upwards to? What are you responsible to report on? And would that be similar? So on a weekly basis, you're reporting your
Yep.
sales forecast, some of the key marketing numbers, delivery numbers, etc.
Yeah, that's right. I think for me, when I think about, because I'd say half the battle is just me having a really good understanding of the business.
Yeah.
When I think about managing ups, and that for me, it's reporting up to basically the CRO or the CEO.
Yeah.
I think the level of detail they need, especially because of our region being a smaller piece of the business, perhaps than the Americas, is
Yeah.
they need a lot less detail, generally speaking. So we'll give them, the sales forecast every week by product line. So
Yeah.
it's a sales forecast by product line every week. So we're giving them that. The rest, they don't need on a weekly basis. The rest they'll take on a monthly or maybe sometimes even quarterly basis, because these things will be like we reforecast from a finance perspective quarterly.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the quarter, we kind of know how much headcount we have, what's our anticipated spend against a certain revenue, and kind of what are we trying to operate on in terms of our overall financial profile. We'll
Yeah.
revisit that once a quarter, and that's when we really get into, okay, well, we thought we were going to spend this much on this area. You
Yeah.
actually spent more on that, but less on this. How did it net out? How does that change how we think about future quarters and months budgeting?
Yeah.
Has there been any material changes in the field that we need to incorporate, or new growth opportunities that we need to double down and invest on? So that happens more on a quarterly basis, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. So finance planning quarterly, leadership, so you're tracking your metrics every week, really digging into the sales forecast, and then you're reporting your sales forecast numbers up to the center where they're kind of looking at
Yeah,
overall sales across the business as you
yeah,
go through the quarter. That's awesome. Let's maybe jump into, if you were I don't know if you have a finance business partner that works with you in the region,
mm,
but I suppose the question is, how would you describe the perfect finance partner for you as a sales leader, but
yeah,
quite a data savvy sales leader? I would call you a next gen leader that's coming through, very data savvy,
yeah,
probably quite impatient, willing to dive into tools, etc.
yeah,
How would you describe, the perfect finance manager or finance business partner for you?
yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I always tell anybody I work with, especially in finance, that I'm probably such a pain in the you know what, because coming from my background of having implemented and sold financial planning as a product and a concept, I'm probably annoyingly in the details, and probably have annoyingly strong points of view on what the right way to represent the business financially is. So yeah, I think it's a fair call out. For me, a perfect business partner, I want to give a shout out. So I do have a business partner. Unfortunately, he's not based in Singapore. He's based in London, actually.
Okay. Okay.
And shout out to Greg Carter. I think he's actually the best finance business partner I've had the pleasure of working with. And I think what makes him great, and I think what makes any finance business partner great, is really um, being, I think, curious and interested in understanding not just the outcomes, but understanding the mechanics and the context of your business, right? And I think Greg does a great job of that. For example, right, Carta, when you think of Carta globally, it's a Series G company. last valuation was over 7 billion, 2,000 employees. It's a
Yeah.
big company to some,
Yeah.
it's a proper scale up. And what the way you think about the business at that stage of growth is very different. Especially today, people are thinking a lot about profitability, right, and efficient growth, and things like Rule of 40 and these other metrics that are ways to kind of evaluate that. Then when you think about our region, Asia Pacific, where we are basically building almost from scratch.
Mm.
In many ways, we more resemble like a Series A type of company within that broader, bigger company where we're putting growth rates on the board of 200%, for example,
Yeah.
which was kind of roundabout where we're going to be this year. So therefore, our challenges are different. I'm not, today it wouldn't make sense if my finance business partner is like, "Oh, okay, well, globally we're trying to be 5%, EBITDA. So you
Yeah.
also have to be 5%
Mm.
EBITDA." Like that's not necessarily the case, right? What we're trying to do is we're a growth area within the business. We're trying as hard as we can to grow as fast as we can and as much as we can. And then we're very much in investment mode. We have
Yeah.
different metrics we look at. We have different benchmarks for what those metrics should be in a healthy level of growth. And so I think that context switching, as I call it, is super important, especially if one finance business partner is working with two different business units that are completely in different stages of growth. And then also, all the different kind of, I'd say the other thing that I think Greg and generally a good finance business partner will do is empower, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we know what we need to, we know what the constraints are. I think it's finance's job to put in place constraints for a business leader because they're like, hey, we can't spend more than this much, or actually we can't spend this more than this percent of revenue, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if the revenue is more, you can spend more. If the revenue is less, you got to spend less, right? That's a fair constraint to put in place.
Yeah.
But I think that should kind of really be the job of finance, and then empowering the business unit leader to say, how do you want to do that? Like, what are the ways you want to do that? If you want to cut marketing by 20% and increase and add a couple headcount on this other function over here because you think that's the right way to get there versus maybe sacrifice two senior hires to create five junior hires or vice versa, or maybe even go completely off the rail and say, hey, I'm going to change offices and save 10K a month on rent, and I'm redirecting that into a PR agency that we want to bring on to like engage media. Like these are
Mm.
the kinds of trade-offs and decisions that a good finance business partner will empower and also enable a
Yeah.
business unit leader to understand how to do those things, how it works, and make sure the math is always still making sense to the outcome, but letting you come up with the path rather
Yeah.
than forcing, a playbook path down your throat, which is like this many headcount, these should be the ratios, everything just needs to fit into this box.
Yeah.
Because again, in the context of a growth environment, that just wouldn't work for us.
Yeah. So it's not their job to say no. It's their job to help you understand if it's a good idea, and then in certain instances look at how you could do that, make that investment or do that project. If you could save money, trim money elsewhere, so
Totally.
to fit within your overall constraints. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's really that's the partner, finance
Mm.
business partner. They're a
Yeah.
partner to
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
in achieving your business goals.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, working through
Yeah.
with them. And they have the subject matter expertise when it comes to dollars and cents. So
Yeah.
leaning on them
Yeah.
there, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So let's chat tech a bit.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite parts of the show. So what is some of the key tech that's essential for you as manager director, sales leader in the region?
Um, yeah, look, I think so. I'll be specific to my role because I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of tech that my team is using on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And not those aren't all systems that I necessarily have to use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
As it tends to be the case, the more expansive your scope or your mandate or your remit is,
Yeah.
you tend to become slightly abstracted out of some of the tech because it's often execution oriented or operational in nature, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm being, really honest, like the tech that I use the most is Slack, obviously, just from a
Yeah.
pure communications perspective. That's critical.
Yeah.
It's Zoom, and I don't want to go through and list like the
Yeah.
classic
Yeah.
tech stack of any company, but I think for me, the most like critical non standard tech is actually what I call the abstraction layer.
Yeah.
Is how do I have a single place to see everything? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the real thing I'm trying to solve for is how can I see all the data, all the numbers, all the projects, all the things
Yeah.
in one place and understand how they kind of are all interdependent on each other
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that I'm empowered to understand that if I tweak any one of these dials, what happens to the rest? Because they're not independent. And I think that's the biggest problem that senior leaders deal with is they understand that in their minds, it makes sense. It's this like kind of living organism and you can kind of tweak things. But in reality, you tweak something and all these other things are completely disconnected. You don't really understand the impact until it's much too late. You need to make these decisions quickly. You need to make them sometimes in real time. And so having, again, what I call an abstraction layer, I think traditionally we've called it enterprise performance management tools, BI tools, with some collaboration components, things of, systems like that,
Yeah.
systems like blocks, I think are very much in that space. That for me are critical.
Yeah.
That's probably the most critical piece of tech to manage the
Yeah.
business effectively.
Okay. So it pulls data together. Can you get that view straight from the CRM,
No,
or why not? Because they're
CRM has no financial data, as an
okay.
example. So
Sure.
like I
Yeah.
can understand sales pipeline, I can understand some level of forecast. I have no idea how that translates to revenue or costs, as an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk to marketing. In sometimes it can, but it generally doesn't give you the level of detail that you need from the marketing system in terms of your spend and your cost
Yeah.
per click and your conversions up funnel, for example. It doesn't pull in the HR data, right? So if you do, because everything's around people and it's like there's
Mhm.
costs associated to people, those aren't reflected in CRM. So there's no single system, no single transaction system
Yeah.
by almost by definition that can
Yeah.
solve it all. You have to have a system on top of the systems that
Yeah.
brings all the systems together
Yeah.
and allows you to then start making sense of those interdependencies
Yeah.
between things.
Yeah. And so in a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, that would just be a spreadsheet where
Lots of spreadsheets
you're
and
downloading
PowerPoints.
different tabs and then you're pulling
Yeah,
it together, and maybe a PowerPoint on top for your
yeah,
meeting.
yeah,
And then there's different levels of maturity, but then you may see an enterprise performance management EPM solution that gets put
yeah,
in to be that place where you can pull the different data and start building out, kind of connecting these operational and financial metrics.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, that's
yeah.
fantastic. So that's
That's the
that's
one.
what that's the one. That's
That's
most
the
important for you.
that's
Yeah,
the one. Yeah. There's a lot of other tools. Like I said, I mean,
yeah,
okay, I could live without that.
yeah,
I probably need Slack more. I need Zoom more. Yeah, I think those go without saying. Those are
yeah, 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 yeah,
it's how I communicate with people, and
yeah,
that's probably the most important part of my job. But if you assume, we've got all the basics,
yeah, yeah. That's
then
another one.
email, right?
Yeah,
Email maybe.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
uh,
Awesome. Fantastic, Bobby. Let's just bring this into a wrap. I'll just throw a few quick fire questions at you.
let's do it.
Um, yeah, and let's just see how many we can get through. So, what would you say is your favorite catchphrase to use with your team?
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Culture, eat strategy for breakfast. Brilliant one.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your favorite chart and why?
It's a combination chart where the target is a line and actuals and forecast are columns that are stacked on each other. So
Okay.
you've got the actuals in black and then the forecast is stacking on top of the actuals in gray. So you
Okay.
can see kind of where you were relative to target, and then also
Yeah.
where you think you're going to be relative to
Yeah.
target. Yeah.
Okay. So you can see
Yeah.
what you've closed and how much more you still have to go. So that kind of gives you an idea of risk around meeting the number.
Exactly. Combo
Okay.
chart, stacked column combo chart.
I like it. I like it a lot. What's your favorite place to get work done?
Uh, this room.
Your yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Looks
this
you're a very nice setup there.
the home
Yeah,
office. Get work done is I put it in two categories. One is
yeah,
like what we, people call deep work or like
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously, the other type of work is alignment with people, and
yeah,
that happens in the office.
yeah,
So I love the hybrid model,
yeah,
2 or 3 days in the office, and then
yeah,
deep work in this room a lot.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. You need a bit of both. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise things come off kilter. Um, what what activity, person, or place comes to mind when I say the words living the dream?
There's a person, which is funny. You might remember him, a guy named Sal, from
Uh-huh.
the early days of Anaplan. He was my first boss, I think. He was my first
Okay.
manager, and he
Yeah.
must have said that. That was that was his standard
Okay.
answer. Like, "How are you doing? Living the dream." Like, and so he pops into my brain. As soon as he said that, I was like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's Sal's phrase." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah,
it's a person, but yeah,
it's a person.
I remember Sal's. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I can imagine that response. And then what's something you have on your I want to learn more about this topic list?
Yeah. Um, Well, okay, so right now there's a lot of stuff about the operations and the mechanics of how investment firms work because it's
Mm,
something that's relatively new for me and I'm
yeah.
still learning 1 year in. You've got venture capital funds, you've got private debt, you've got real
Yeah.
estate,
Yeah.
you've got private equity. So it can get pretty complex. So that directly related to my work. But I
Yeah.
will give you one more answer, which is more personal, which is
Yeah.
policy. I find I find public policy and there's policy work in general
Yeah.
super interesting and difficult, and therefore interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just yeah I think because they're solving in an ideal world they're solving humanity's problems
Yes.
rather
Yeah.
than profit and loss problems, and I think those are
Yeah.
more interesting problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that very interesting.
That's awesome. Nice.
Yeah,
What's something you're looking for help with right now?
my abstraction layer. I mean, that's a little bit on the nose, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a reason we're
Yeah.
chatting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that abstraction layer.
Yeah.
It's yeah, this stuff
Yeah.
that exists just doesn't work for me. Either it's too expensive or it's not powerful enough, and
Yeah.
I'm looking for the middle ground.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hello, blocks. Yes. Um, yeah, awesome. Or it's too centralized, it sounds like as well, and
That's the big problem. You're
you don't
so
have
right.
the responsibility, the control in region to do what you need to do.
Totally. There's not a PLG or product led growth, right? There's not a PLG EPM yet. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really need is something I can just get going with,
Yeah.
download data from multiple systems together, plop it in, and then build my own model like I do in Excel. I can do it in Excel. I
Yeah.
just want a system version of that, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
need help
And
with.
Excel, Excel's just too annoying to work in when
It's
we
terrible,
know there's more
especially once you've done it. Once
Yeah.
once you've tasted it,
Yeah.
it's like flying business class. It's really
Yeah.
hard to go back to economy once you've flown in business.
Yeah.
Before you've
Yeah.
flown business, you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. I sleep on the
Yeah.
flight
Okay. I don't
anyways.
mind.
It's not
Yeah.
that bad. And then once you've
Yeah.
had it, you're like, wait a
Yeah, yeah. I don't
second.
want to go back copying and pasting, inserting
Yeah.
rows and columns, trying to, all
Hashtag
text
NA.
everywhere, all this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you very much, Bhavik. It's been a real
Yeah.
pleasure. If people want to get in touch with you or follow your journey, what's the best place? What's the best social platform for you?
Yeah, I'm not super good at social, but LinkedIn I think is the
Okay.
best way. So you can connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
or if you're interested in anything about Carta, you can just reach out, Bhavik@carta.com. Pretty easy one.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Bhavik, thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Simon. See ya.
All right. Yeah.